welcome to Building Digital Cities on the Edge. This is an expert panel with representatives from city governments and from technology leaders developing our edge computing, looking at smart city technology. And I think the real basis for the conversation, what I want to get at with this panel today is how are they talking about edge computing and its value with elected officials and selling it? Given the influx of dollars that we're going to see from the federal government, how are we looking at paying for this, not just for the capital outlay, but how are we going to sustain it over time? So what are some of the new or innovative revenue sharing models that could come out of this? And what are some of the use cases that they've been challenged by on adoption? So to introduce the panel, starting from my left, Keith Hanson, who's the CTO of Shreveport, Louisiana. Winston Lazar, CEO of Spread Networks. Ashley Turner, Chief Innovation Officer and Experience Officer for City of Reno. Eric Hornsby, CEO of SmartPoint.io. And Brandon Branham, CTO and Assistant City Manager for the City of Peachtree Corners, Georgia. My first question is I'm just going to open it up to the city panel members. When you have to explain edge computing to your elected officials, or we're getting benefits from the edge, what's the two-sentence explainer? How do you make that work? How do you sell that? We'll start with Brandon.
Me? Okay.
I'm going to steal your answer.
You're going to steal it?
I'm gonna steal it.
I'm okay with that.
Yep.
It's, taking traditional servers, right? As everyone knows, a server in the closet, and moving it to the physical edge, closer to our devices that are out there. So taking that, putting it out on your infrastructure, on your light poles. That's what mobile edge compute.
Can I ask a really quick follow-up
Yes.
for the audience? Why is that important to have it at the edge?
Yes, as we think about latency in our applications, the need to get information out quicker, the closer you are to that edge device, the faster we can turn that information around to make more informed decisions.
Ashley, anything different for Reno? I know because culture means everything, so that's Georgia. What's going on in Nevada?
What I would say in Nevada is we actually assess things from a risk assessment component. So interestingly enough, moving your servers closer to your device, we actually migrated different from that, and we took all of our servers into an off-site location in order to avoid, we have a lot of natural disasters that happen, earthquakes, wildfires. Right now our air quality is the worst in the entire country. So we have to be able to mitigate for a lot of natural disasters, and so keeping those servers actually off-site has been a key for success, and it's a risk assessment tool for us.
That's great. Keith? How about Shreveport in the South?
So my introduction of Edge into our government was around our real-time crime center and trying to get cameras on poles that respected privacy and didn't lose evidence when the internet flapped over cellular, right? And so the way I sold it effectively to my bosses was, we can make these a lot less expensively in-house. We can stick the computer and the hard drive and everything on the pole, and now the only thing that would allow evidence to be lost is power loss, which is a lot, anyway.
So these are some distinct use cases happening here. Security, low cost. Brandon, I didn't get a use case for you. Give that for the audience, and we'll build upon it.
No, thanks, Mark. As we're doing a lot in the V2X space, so as we think about communication of vehicle to infrastructure, vehicle to pedestrian, protecting vulnerable road users, being able to turn over high latency in areas that vehicles and drivers can't see when there's a car in front of them, what's happening at that intersection in that pedestrian crosswalk, being able to turn that data over quickly to the drivers as they're coming and approaching, creating a safer street for them.
Okay, great. We've got some really concrete use cases. From my perspective in Philadelphia, it's a complex older city, and moving some of this edge computing forward, there's always been a cost to it. There's always some cultural resistance, and I mean cultural very broadly, because now we're putting more devices, infrastructure on the streets. That's always going to be contentious. If it's a historic neighborhood, if it's a high traffic neighborhood, there's lots of tensions to solve for. That's one barrier I can think of. I'm interested from Winston and Eric's point of view as solving and being solution providers, for governments. What are some other major challenges, and how would you, for deputy mayors and elected officials, recommend overcoming some of those?
Well, I just want to jump back to what we were just talking about briefly, and then I'm happy to answer that question. So I don't have a 2-sentence, I have a 2-word response. I would not explain edge computing. I would jump, as we did, to the use cases. So I always think about technology in the frame of why, as Mark asked. So here with edge compute, the why is that it actually enables use cases. It's low latency, high response, or it's low cost. Challenges to implementation in my world have to do with 2 things. It's open standards-based technologies that enables the interface across a lot of different types of resources and connectivity, which is the second layer. In order to implement any sort of edge computing solution, you need to have the connectivity available for whatever that is, sending telemetry data back, sending high resolution data back. So that's kind of how I think about it.
Yeah, hi. So as a technology provider, we look at commercial viability and sustainability, which are 2 things that you're going to find synonymous in the smart city dialogue, really in any conversation. So when you talk edge computing, and Brandon spoke to this just a moment ago, we're looking at latency intolerant and data packet transport intensive applications. And these are enterprise applications. These are things that need to reside on infrastructure that can be trusted and is resilient. And so having not only a technologically sustainable, but commercially viable model involve having a technology solution that can be executed and maintained over a contract term. But I agree with Winston wholeheartedly. Focusing on the use case and why. Why are you deploying edge computing? Which again, we're hearing now. So making sure it can withstand natural disasters or what have you, right? These are things we can solve for. But focusing on things that are going to add significant value, cellular V2X, pedestrian safety being an outcome of that, and others are, I think, great starting points.
And I understand all of that. And I only have my experience and perspective where sometimes that isn't enough given a city or a large city, a city with a high poverty rate, maybe violence issues, maybe underfunded infrastructure for decades, roads, bridges, the lifeline of the economy. Now we're talking about the new lifeline and why we need to build this out. Still can be a real challenge. For the city folks, what's the sustainability model? What's the funding model look like after IIJA funds for capital are gone? How are you looking at if your goal is a sensor network all over the place for traffic to cars? Ashley, I don't know what the vision is for Reno, and you can comment on that. And then Keith, you can come in on third with yours. How are you going to sustain and pay for this? Ashley?
Oh, I get to lead the front on that one. Like every city, we just need more money. So one of the things, we're all in the midst of having a once-in-a-generational infusion of cash into the government, and it's important that our policymakers are using that in the most effective way that they can. We're looking, and into Reno, we're turning into a gig city. We have Tesla right up the street. We have Microsoft. We have Google. We have some massive tech companies that have come into our area, and they demand faster connectivity. What we found is that the pandemic really highlighted the lack of infrastructure. So one of the small things that we're doing is whenever we pull up a street or pull up a sidewalk, we're making sure that we're laying conduit to be able to pull the cable through and the fiber through at a later time. We always encourage cities to look into franchise agreement opportunities for your cable network providers, because anything that goes across that fiber is an opportunity for a franchise agreement. So those are some of the things that we're really making sure that we're focusing on, so we don't leave any dimes on the table, because it's not just dollars at this point. Cities are really going to have to continue to be innovative with the use of that money.
Agreed. I think another model, and one we're working on in Peachtree Corners, is really tapping in. We've heard a lot about the triple P, right, over the last few years, but really evaluating the use of what cities own, operate, which is public infrastructure, and turning that into an ability to monetize that asset. Right? No one is taking that away from the city, so turn that into an opportunity to work with a partner to come out with a solution to generate long-term OpEx covering costs, and some Eric I know we'll talk about in a little bit.
Keith, you've got a really interesting revenue model. Well, not just a revenue model, but a participation and incentive model. So, talk about that.
There's 2 things I want to talk about quickly. I hope. Our public safety cameras, we are using that as a way to put more LoRaWAN on poles. And we use LoRaWAN as the long-range radio system. We're using helium technology for that incentivizes our citizens to put a radio on their roof and allow me to burn HNT tokens to get data credits, right? And so ultimately, because Winston and other folks like him are in our community, like doing this kind of work, it ends up generally being almost free to our city to have a wide range radio network. And because
Almost free.
Almost. Look, in government, if something's less than $1,000, it's practically free. And when I can put a camera with 3 directional 4K streams on a hard drive inside of a box, all for $750, not including the mount, then I'm sorry, it's affordable. And it's not only just affordable, I can use my surpluses in IT, which city folk know, maybe you don't know, but you know, we have a gap in our roster. Well, the funding is there. It's going to sit there until the end of the year. So what do you do with that? You go to the council and you say, I need to amend my budget and move it. Well, I'm doing that plenty to cover all of the hardware needs we have. If a box fails, we're replacing a $10 part. So like, we're doing that in-house, which is not for everybody, no doubt. But that's a lot of the ways we're cutting a lot of the cost.
Can I ask, what type of staffing buildup did you need around that? If you're going to do it in-house, what does that then look like at long-term operation?
All right, so I started out with a special projects team that was mostly skunkworks type endeavors. Now we've broken that up into their own divisions because of their success. That was about 3.5 years ago or so. And then I have an IoT team that only focuses on things on poles and radio networks and stuff like that. I only have 3 people on this team. It's not a lot. I do depend on vendors like Winston who can help me navigate the long-range radio, setup and deployment and all of that. I don't have a pole climber. I don't have a bucket truck. I'd love those things, right? If I had a bucket truck, it'd make it all even cheaper.
I can't believe you don't have a bucket truck and you're doing this. But I know, Winston, that's part of your role here in the Shreveport project.
I'd say we play an important role here, and I want to highlight some words that Keith is using. It all revolves around ownership, control over the city's infrastructure. We are dogmatically committed to using open standards-based tools. I can't use those 2 words, open standards, enough in this talk. So if you guys take anything away from this, it is that you guys should be looking to own and take control over your infrastructure. There are enough tools and technology available at a disruptively low cost. I actually don't think about the cost of edge compute, to be honest. If the city is owning it and we're leveraging, taking advantage of some of these open source and in some cases decentralized tools, the cost is actually not a factor in an ongoing capacity.
Brandon, how many devices do you have out there at this point? Can you give me a just
couple
rough
hundred?
estimate?
A few hundred.
Few hundred?
Yeah.
Keith, when you get to full build out, what's your...
So we'll have 140 pole cameras as the beginning of this, right? We also partner with businesses and things like that to get more cameras, but pole cameras, we'll have about 200 as my goal for hopefully, first quarter next year. And then because it's affordable, we could just keep ramping that up into the key locations they need to be, right?
Okay.
And deploy, communication network and things like that all at the same time.
How are you thinking about refresh rates? I want to come back to the sustainability again. I'm not going to let you guys off the hook. Sustainability, one more time, like refresh rates on this equipment, and you got a small team, Brandon or anyone, how you think about this and keeping this alive going forward?
Yeah, you got it. I'll jump in. So I'm going to speak to commercial viability again. So when you look at a 10-year, 15-year, 20-year term with a city, because these are not 9-month, 18-month solutions. So taking a commercial stance on how you're deploying these projects needs to be viable for the long term, needs to have an effective total cost of ownership over a contract period, over a performance period. So whether it's an inexpensive solution on day one or it's very expensive, you need to be able to take into account both refresh but as also sustainability of the tech. So in Peachtree Corners, we're able to map out what are the city needs, not just from a edge computing and hardware standpoint, but backhaul to take care of all the connected assets. And you need to put a financial model together that's going to not just pass muster on day one or for the first 12 months, but be sustainable in a public-private partnership format to operate effectively. You hear about too many projects that start off exciting, and then they die off, they fade away, someone pulls out. It's because you didn't look at it as a business, and a business that needs to be successful. When a P3 takes commercial viability hand in hand with technological sustainability, you've got a great success formula.
Are there any new revenue sharing models? We always hear about advertising. That's a big one. Now you could do Wi-Fi provisioning and businesses could pay for the Wi-Fi. There could be a component of that comes back to the city. Anything else the audience should be aware of or keep our eyes on, put into our RFIs to ask how it's possible?
Sure. So SmartPoint was born out of a very advertising-centric technology business. And it's a business that generates billions and billions of dollars. I was actually speaking at an event at Boston College, and I remember a lovely woman from the ACLU stood up and made some color commentary about us as a technology provider being an enabler to the telcos to optimize all the people in the room as really the products for monetization of advertising. It was not a positive comment. But with recent advancements, with blockchain, with open standards, there's a real opportunity to bridge that gap, really have a theme of inclusivity where the people who brand activation impressions are intended to reach, intended for advertisers to change your behavior, and they're willing to pay for that. You, as a user of the infrastructure where that advertising is delivered, could start to benefit by way of token incentives and other participation. But straight to your question, there are lots of edge cross-connect, connectivity, devices that are going to use the network for data packet transport. These are some of the largest industries in the world. These are the AT&Ts, the T-Mobiles. But these are things that are being not just decentralized, but they're becoming partnership with the public entity that is then going to be able to leverage that treasure trove of valuable real estate to produce additional income streams that can benefit the community.
So the more we own, the more that there's a fee that we can charge for access to our edge computing. And Ashley had said franchise agreements, owning the conduit fees, all of that. Brandon, do you have more?
I mean, you think utilities have been doing this for a long time, co-location agreements. Same concept, just you're doing it inside of the computing process instead of hanging the device on a pole.
Co-location also applies in the case if you're just looking at what a city is doing. So what we're doing in Shreveport, when we roll out one service for one vertical within the city, we are always looking ahead at how we can support the next set of use cases for another vertical. I want to take a step back, though, and just kind of make an overarching statement here. I think we're all technologists, so you wouldn't be in this room if you weren't a technologist. And because of that, I think we would all acknowledge that both bandwidth and compute power are, in the macro sense, trending towards zero cost. Blockchains and token incentives have turbocharged that trend. So whether the city invests some CapEx in rolling out infrastructure or whether you're leveraging decentralized tools and community-owned infrastructure, at the end of the day, the ongoing cost of operating these systems is trending towards free.
Yeah,
No, go for it.
So our real-time crime center, the cameras we built, all of that's been in operation for a year. So I have a pretty good handle on what the maintenance is like, and certainly some of the lessons that we learned along the way. But he's right. I don't think we crested 10K in repairs in a year. Now, down the road, perhaps, but when we have a $1,000 setup, and if we're only replacing certain components of that, because we're in-house, because we know which pieces we need to improve, because we're living and eating it and breathing it every day at that team, and all of the things that we just talked about, the blockchain, et cetera, any ways where we can responsibly earn revenue without selling the farm, I feel like, because I don't want to, maybe I'm alone up here, but I am not into advertising our data. That is, to me, taxpayers paid me to put all this up. Why do I need more of their money in the terms of, selling their information to everybody? I have a philosophical stance against it. So, but I've had to figure out how to thread that needle and survive, right? And do the things the Smart City Challenge was given to me for, right? So,
Ashley, how is Reno looking at some of those privacy concerns? Have you developed any policies at this point, or looking at to do some policies? Do you have pressures one way or the other to commoditize the data?
We've been pretty fortunate, as we have a biennium legislature that convenes. We elect our politicians in the even, they set the laws in the odd. We had a pilot program going with Audi a few years ago, and connectivity on power poles in order to pick up automated driving. And we have some very, very robust public records laws in the state of Nevada, in which nearly everything you do is public, unless we can find a legal reason to hold that, and there's only 3. So as far as the data comes out, it's not necessarily a sale component, because it's free and it's available, and we have a duty to turn it over. So we've really had to focus on multi-step encryption and making sure that we're withholding as much as we can on the back end, so then we don't have metadata to have to produce, which comes with extra cost. And as people who work in the government know, many of our systems are antiquated at best. We have systems we're replacing right now of being on the edge, because we're consolidating 6 softwares into one. Because right now we're still identifying snowplow routes by way of a whiteboard and a front seat during a snowstorm. So you laugh because it's true, because it's happening in your cities too. We're excited that 2 months from now we're going to be launching work orders in which there's not carbon paper being used. Right? It's absolutely astounding to me. So when we start looking at selling data, there's one benefit of being a bit antiquated with some of your softwares. There's nothing to give. So we're really trying to make sure that we're doing the work in the back end, because once it's in the system, it's available for sale or otherwise. No one's going to pay us for it, because they can just ask for it for free.
We've got a couple minutes left, and all things are local. All your decisions are local. They're based on the problems you're trying to solve in each of your jurisdictions, and for the technology providers, you get a really good sense of what those are and how they change from region to region. I'm going to go through the panel one by one and ask, what's the current problem that's on the table for you to solve? Just reiterate your use case again. What's the next one that you want to solve with these smart city tools and edge computing? Brandon?
So we're working on a project right now, right? We're here talking about digital equity. We're fortunate we have a ton of fiber in our city, but it's not affordable. So we saw through the pandemic, and still the connectivity for these students in these areas of the city aren't able to access high-speed internet. So we're working on a project changing the lighting infrastructure to serve as that access point for Wi-Fi, deploying 60 nodes in a single neighborhood to have a dense coverage for access, giving priority to a .edu address so that they're getting the higher bandwidth versus other users, and then bringing in the mobile edge compute to build off of the safety and security aspect for our police services, and then some of our V2X applications.
Our use case is a bit different in Reno. We just recently launched a public blockchain in which we are maintaining our historical property registry upon. It's a database, and this is something that, as everyone in here likely knows, PDFs are not accessible to persons with disabilities and sight impairments. That is something that blockchain is helping to actually bridge that gap in that sector of your government that previously did not have access to their government, because sight readers can actually read a blockchain. So that's been an initiative that we're really proud of, and we want to expand that into land use components, things that were very paper heavy, and the record keeping is abysmal. We had use case in which we had a very small business as a startup, and they were going to have to put in a $500,000 commercial kitchen because we could not find one permit from the 80s. And so the blockchain allows us to be able to bridge that gap from a record keeping standpoint, so we're able to get more small businesses up and running sooner and help them to come back from the pandemic faster.
That's great. Pick anything, Eric and Winston, from your portfolio.
Yeah, I would just say we're excited about we talked a little about advertising and connectivity, but edge computing as a focus and operating an edge microcloud and really empowering applications. Brandon's talked about cellular V2X. There's outcomes that have plenty of budget and ROI around pedestrian and multimodal safety. But, quickly I'll just say empowering an application ecosystem that leverages an edge microcloud is something we're really focused on.
I hate to be such a sharp contrast, but I don't care. I'm a technologist. I really don't care. I care about people. So whatever use cases impact people. So in the case of Shreveport, Keith's probably going to talk about public safety. So I'm not going to say anything more about that. But what I care about is, we're using taxpayer dollars in the case of smart city funding, and I want the end user, in this case citizens, to experience improved quality of life. So I'll just give you one example that pertains to Shreveport: water quality and water pressure monitoring.
Yeah, that'll be a great next one. We're out of time, so I'm going to go really fast.
Nope.
We're good? Okay,
Yeah,
all right.
just you got time.
So for me, I am very focused on public safety. So is our citizens. That's what they shout about the most. So we're addressing those things first. We are kind of parlaying that into other sensors. And because we control the software in the box, which is open source, by the way. If you want to look at what we've done, you can go to GitHub, City of Shreveport. You'll see us on there with all of our crime camera stuff. But now I can analyze frames and count cars. Well, what I didn't know before was a real-time count of traffic study, right? So that's a big deal, actually, because instead of 6 or 7 pneumatic strips for $7,000 being carted around 123 square miles in our city, now wherever my camera is, I can say, oh, we had 200% more 18-wheelers on that road than we ever understood before, right? So that road's not going to last 10 years. It's going to last 2, right? So that's the kind of thing that's the conversation I'm having inside of Shreveport city government when someone asks me, like, Keith, why are you spending so much of your time and energy, not budget, but so much of your time and energy on all of this work? And it's like, because that box on that pole is about to give us way more information than we've ever had before, right?
I love it, and that's Philadelphia's case in point. You just made it. That's why we're making those investments. All of those planning decisions that have to be made, that take years of data collection and understanding, we think we can get to much, much faster and anticipate. So thank you, panel, so much for being here, and thank you all, and have a great rest of the afternoon.